joining us from a top secret location because of the kind of work she does. Monica Villamizar. Did I get that right?
You did very well.
Okay.
Thank you.
I have so many questions for you. I've been watching your stories and all that you've done. You report from the most dangerous places in the world, drug czars, wars, uprisings. And my question to you is, what are you, crazy?
You know, that question that you're asking me, my parents ask me all the time, and they worry a lot. And I mean, I guess my simple answer to that is you never really choose to get into this life at all. Like, it's not a voluntary, like, conscious choice. I think, as you guys know, journalism is very competitive, and you start doing stories, and if you realize that if you have an edge, that if you're like, good at something, you want to keep on doing it because it's so competitive. And when I started, I was just thrown into these places, and they kept on sending me. And I guess, people talk to me for whatever reason in this very difficult situations and opened up, and I started doing it. But I don't think anybody in their right mind wants to go to dangerous places to see the horrific things we see in war zones and things like that. But I think I developed,
tell us some of the quick places. Give me a quick listings for those who, may have missed your reporting. The few of us who may have missed it. Go down some of the stories you've done and some of the places you've been.
Okay. So I've covered the drug wars pretty much everywhere in Mexico, Jamaica, Colombia, El Salvador, Honduras, you name it. I've been to Iraq. I've been to Afghanistan a couple of times. I've been to really dangerous places in Africa, which I didn't know they were so dangerous until I was like in pretty hairy situations like Congo, DRC. I guess it's not only the place, but the kind of stories have always been challenging, to say the least.
So you go right to the heart of the center of the drug trade, say.
Yes.
And the people on the street who are selling, and how do you get them to talk to you?
That's a really good question. I think especially for TV, right? Because what I do is TV. And it's so much harder, as you guys know, to film people than just to quote them in an article for a newspaper, for instance. I think everybody, this is a very deep thing. I think people really want to leave a mark. I think people are obsessed with immortality or living like legacy. And I think if you can find a way, because these big drug lords are hiding and they have everything to lose by speaking to you, and that's kind of the first derivative. But if you really get to explaining to them that what they do, because they live in the shadows, can actually, be seen, or people can hear their own version of the story and stuff, sometimes you'd be surprised. They're really more willing to share the story than you would think. Sometimes it's just not possible. And
I saw a story you did where they blindfolded you and took you in a car and in the middle of the night. I mean, it's crazy shit you see in movies.
It's crazier than what you see in movies, perhaps.
She's like, I need to direct those movies. They're making mistakes.
The stakes are really higher, and I really try not to think about it too much. But weirdly enough, the blindfold is actually something that protects you as a journalist, because it's just a lot easier in terms of like law enforcement or things going wrong, saying, I don't even know where I was, right? In a way, I don't know if that makes sense, but it's actually
possible deniability, I guess, right?
Yeah, I mean, you really don't know where you were. So it's not like, because a lot of the real danger, and people don't realize this, the real danger of covering, these type of stories is that there's a raid and people blame you for snitching out, on law enforcement. That's usually the way it goes, and people don't realize that that's really the main danger. So if you don't know where you even were in the first place, they can never blame you.
So and it's not you telling the story because they're okay with the story being told. They just don't want you to be cooperating with the police. They need you as a separate entity And you
Exactly.
have nothing to do with like the law enforcement.
Exactly. And I think that's our safety, you know, in general. I think for journalism in conflict areas, it's just that you're not part of the government, you're not part of this, you're not part of anything. You're a kind of, you know, neutral entity who's just there. And I think that's what saves and protects us ultimately. I mean, the moment journalists start cooperating and telling things to law, I mean, I think that that's terrible, and that's something that shouldn't happen. That's not really our role per se.
Now,
It's
are you
not.
ever pressured by law enforcement to give up sources or
No,
no?
thankfully,
Okay,
never.
that's good.
Exactly. No, that's never happened to me. But I think, you know, there clearly are some countries where they're trying to track you, you know, to track your movements, to see who you're meeting up with. And I mean, it's just, I don't know. I feel like journalists, we just have the toughest job, you know, everybody's kind of out there to get us or use us or manipulate us. And it's just, I don't know. I think it's such a
Well,
tough job in the end.
it's really interesting because you have to think of as a journalist that anybody who wants to talk to you has you know, they're trying to sway an opinion. So you as the person, you have to realize that everybody's using you in some way, shape, or form. And but you have to be like, okay, I know they're using me, and in a way I'm using them to get to the truth. But at the same time, I also have to make sure that the truth is what we're reaching for. And it's hard because you've got to sort out a lot of different things to see, because maybe they're not telling you the truth, you know, and you have to be able
Exactly.
to check this or check it. And it must be hard when you're in those kinds of situations, right?
Absolutely. I think, I mean, you've summarized it perfectly. I think that's really our profession. And then you have to really think about, am I willing to give this person a platform, or, you know what I mean? What are the costs? Am I getting more out of it? Is the viewer, you know, getting more out of this interview? Because exactly, we can't, you know, everybody has like a motive for doing
Right.
things. And
So
I guess, you know, figuring that out is really important, or
let's
trying to.
let's back up a little bit. I want to know how you got into journalism. Like, was that your college major, and then did you start at you know, local TV, or did you just go into like
No,
Columbia?
they told her she decided to be a freelance journalist, and so she thought she would just fill in for people at Christmas, and instead they sent her to Nicaragua.
Oh, is that it? Yeah,
Yeah,
I think I might
yeah.
want to hear right from the source
No,
because I'm
no, no.
thinking the story
Actually,
might be
Because
you
wrong.
know,
probably a freelance journalist isn't what you're doing.
that's what I do. I'm a freelance journalist, but you know, I was like a CBS journalist before. I had like a proper job before, and I left all of that because I got bored and I wanted to tell the stories I wanted to tell, you know. So I actually became a freelance journalist after being a staff journalist.
Okay,
So
and then
that's rare,
where
maybe.
did you why did you decide, what was the first country that you wanted to go into, and what was the first story that you felt like wasn't being told? And then how did you have the guts to just go in there? Did you go in there by yourself? Did you bring in a photographer, or what, like how did you do that?
Security.
Security?
Yeah, no, actually, I have a really good anecdote, you know, where people think again that I'm crazy, but I had a very comfortable job as a CBS News correspondent in London. So I would do the international news for the, like, on camera. I was, you know, for the affiliates and the local CBS stations and such. And I, you know, I didn't like it at all. I mean, we parted ways amicably, but I, you know, it wasn't my thing. And I was like, I need to go to Afghanistan. So I convinced, at the time I was married, my ex-husband's cousin, who was a fashion DP, to come with me to Afghanistan. And, you know, of course we went there. I mean, I would never do this again. I mean, this was kind of a rookie thing that, you know, now I'm not like that. I'm more responsible. But we just went to Afghanistan. I had a friend there who worked for the UN, no security, nothing, no backup plan, no nothing. So obviously, you know, the first thing, we're in Jalalabad, which is, you know, a very dangerous place. It was back then. And he gets arrested and thrown into prison because we were dressed like local people. I thought it was such a good idea, which, I mean, maybe it would have been, but anyway, yeah, no, I think like I could almost write like a comedy book about the stuff that it's funny now, I guess. It wasn't at the time, but yeah, I just went for it. I was like, nobody's gonna send me here I'm going to set myself here, to
And then
this place. I really,
how did you get the attention then of, was it when you were first at that Afghanistan
Mhm.
job? First of all, I assume he got out of
Yeah,
prison.
I'm wondering what happened to the
He
friend.
did,
Is
he
he
did.
still
Yes,
there? And
thankfully. No,
kind of
we
sucks to
got him
be him,
out,
I
and
guess.
it
I
was
don't know.
like, it was fine, it was definitely fine. It was just kind of like, humorous looking back at it, because of course this guy's dressed in like Pashto outfit with a Pashto hat and everything, and they speak to him, and he just got, so at the time that's what jihadis would do. So law enforcement from the police from Afghanistan were like worried, and they had a reason to be worried that this guy, they thought he was like he was someone else, and we cleared it up, and it was fine.
Well, being a fashion photographer, he was just dressed in the latest fashion garb of,
Yes,
of Afghan,
exactly.
the
He did tell me
Afghan.
he learned a lot about how to put, that do the outfit right and everything in prison. So yeah, no, I was, my family's Colombian, but I was born in Texas, and I started working in a Colombian local, like national TV station in Spanish. But I spoke, quite good, like good English or okay English, and I thought to myself, why are all these English people and Americans telling the world, reporting for CNN and stuff about my country when I know it a lot better? Like I want to be part of, right? Like I want to report on my country, and that's how I started. I was hired by Al Jazeera English, which at the time had just launched
Mm.
like the big, English version of the network. And then I worked for them, and then I left them, shortly after, and I worked for CBS and very briefly for ABC. And then I realized I just wanted to freelance.
So do you come up with the stories and pitch it to the networks or the outlets, or do they come to you and say, we want to send you here and we can't get anybody at the bureau to go because they're afraid, and we know you won't be afraid?
Both. I mean, I have a lot of stories that I pitch. I think part of being a freelance is that you need to like keep on researching and getting stories from everywhere, and get, the bar is higher for freelancers. So oftentimes you have to offer something, you know what I mean, even more kind of exclusive or harder access than the other reporters that are, staff would offer. So the bar is pretty high. So I pitch my own stories, and sometimes I get hired on like as a host, as like for specific assignments. I do a lot of stuff for Vice. I do stuff for PBS for the NewsHour.
I
That's
saw a
been
lot
a
of stories
really
from
nice client.
PBS. Yeah, PBS NewsHour. They seem to,
Mhm,
yeah.
NewsHour, and now I'm directing my first documentary. So I'm really happy. I'm kind of slowly moving towards documentaries and doc series.
Can you share with us what that's about, or is it still a secret?
It's about, I can only say we filmed part in Afghanistan. It's about a filmmaker in a very interesting situation in Afghanistan. So
Very cool. So are you done with the taping part? Or are you still in the interview stages? Are
yes,
you in the
we're
edit?
about to picture lock.
Oh, okay.
So
So what truth are you getting at when you show what's going on? What is the reason that you venture into these zones?
what is the reason? Wow, that's a really good question. I mean, I think just, places where nobody goes, the stories tend to be better. And sometimes it's just, I mean, I'm really old school, like an old school journalist. Like I like reporting on the ground. That's what I do. I mean, that's what I know how to do. I mean, there's great people who are doing, who are pundits and are doing things from the studio, and I admire that a lot. But that's what I like, is to go to places, and the harder it is, I think the story's going to be better and maybe more important, because ultimately these media deserts where like no information is going out, I think it's a grave threat to democracy, to everything. I mean, there's entire places in the world where if I told you guys what's going on, you'd be like, how are we not hearing anything about it? Why not? And I'm like, okay, it's almost like a duty, thing, that I want to go there and report out of these places.
It really feels like it has to be a calling for you
Mhm.
to tell the story and try to educate people. When you're like, so you covered the drug wars that we talked about in Colombia and Mexico, and how do you start to gain access to cartels and drug smugglers? I mean, how does that? Do you have to like just spend a lot of time on the ground and then get to the outer person and then get their trust and to gradually come. And how long does that take to like get the trust of like the people and the, who are really in charge, who can tell you really what's going on?
You just call
I mean,
their spokespeople.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I bet they
they have an
do.
office for that, the cartel.
they have like
You
phones,
you just
they're
call the
listed, they're
toll-free
spokespeople.
spokesperson.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, no, I mean, we did a series, for instance, for Showtime that I was producing. I wasn't on nobody was on camera. It was like a verite series. And for instance, just to give you an idea about how hard the access was, we spent 2 years with a smuggler, a human trafficker, female, very interesting person. We spent 2 years with her before being able to film a single frame.
Mm.
So we're just like
Wow.
hanging out, like
Wow.
just hanging out in her house, playing with her kids, just, gaining trust. I mean, I'm not saying it's always like that, but it takes many shapes and forms. And sometimes you have to like think out of the box and be like, okay, so for instance, specifically in that area, the cartel has to decide she's not part of the cartel, she's a human trafficker, but the cartel has to give permission to film. And just getting to them was so hard. At some point we were like, why don't we go with the local producer and me to the river where they hang out and just approach them? And then we're like, okay, yeah, no, maybe that's a really bad idea. So we didn't do that, luckily. But I mean, there's all kinds of people that work for, there's fixers. And like you say, you start with the foot soldiers and you build your way up. And
Wow.
getting to the top people is usually the hardest. Sometimes
Mhm.
you never get to see them or know who they are. And that's probably safer.
And do you like the people that, I mean, because the woman that you said you got to know for 2 years, would she think that her life is at risk if she's letting you in too fast? I guess, is that why she was being
Yeah,
cautious?
absolutely. She
Yeah.
always thought we were cops or DEA. People always think you're DEA. Like that's the 3-letter word that everybody in Latin America knows. Oh, you work with the DEA. And it's like, no, I really have nothing to do with the DEA. So yeah, she thought we were cops at the beginning. And then she was just like, why? Like my business is flourishing. Like, why would I risk it? Which is also a very human thing. Like, why? But then I think, it's strange. I think everybody likes to be filmed in a way. Everybody likes to feel like, you have something to say to the world. It's a very strange thing. I mean, I often think about it myself. Like, why would they open up to us? Why?
And she was actively involved in human trafficking.
Oh, yeah.
She
Oh,
was,
yeah.
and that was
Oh,
her
yeah.
business. And
It's
what
her
did that
business.
look like?
She's like making a killing out of it too. Like she's really making a lot of money.
And
Yeah.
where was she
It's a big
getting?
business.
Where was she like? What did the whole big picture look like?
So like the way it works is that you have like little kind of coyotes that are like pretty much guides, not really coyotes, who bring all the migrants from like Central America and they stash them in different places in Mexico. And the closer you get to the border, like these hubs, say, of like stash houses become a lot more valuable because you're so close to like, just being able to do like the jump to America, right? So she was just, like let's say in charge of a really big route where she was making a ton of money and she was treating people well. And it's like a lot of these people are business. I mean, it's very horrible, but they do business in a very logical.
So these are people who are paying to get into America, and they're paying. She handles the transactions and the logistics to get them into.
Exactly. Logistics, and she has to give a cut to the cartel, a cut to authorities, corrupt authorities sometimes. I mean, it's like a proper business.
And
I
then
remember she had like a shredder and she was shredding all her which I thought was like fascinating.
So then is there a cut on the other side in the US then too, probably?
It's what people don't know either is that it's usually paid by the relatives in the US.
Okay.
So the way smuggling works is you have to do like Western Union transfers to the smugglers.
Oh, got it.
And
have they gotten to Venmo? No, I'm not joking. I mean,
no, I mean that's a great question. I mean, I don't think so. I don't know. Like, I guess Western Union is not traceable. Maybe I don't know. Oh. But you send dollars, and then they get 3 attempts to send your relative to If they get returned or deported, that's one. You get two more. But I mean, we're talking about like something that could cost like anywhere between $12,000, $18,000, right? It's big money.
Wow.
So that opens up so many questions. I mean, just on the issue of border security and all that, but that's not what you dive into. I mean, you're showing what's going on the ground, not what's happening at the State House and the White House.
Right. But sometimes when you show individual stories and what's happening, it's very like micro, but it's easy to understand, or what politicians maybe don't understand.
Yeah,
like at
I'm
some
sitting
point we
here
wanted to go
thinking,
to Congress and just be like, look guys, policies like seriously. I mean, I lived on the road for 2 years with smugglers. Like there's things that lawmakers are completely disconnected with, meaning they don't understand what's going on the ground, because, and it's not their fault, because nobody has the money or the resources or the motivation to, like spend 2 years of their life on the road with smugglers.
And that's why news stations like CBS, and because they don't want to spend the money for the most part,
Exactly.
right? Like nobody wants to spend
They don't.
the money on I mean, some news organizations do, but
don't name any because they may be her client.
no. I'm just saying that a lot of news organizations, they don't want to spend the money on the real heavy work. Good journalism is expensive because that's
Exactly.
not a day turn. It could be a year turn. It could be a 2-year turn.
Exactly. I mean, I was really lucky, exactly, to be, hired by a production company that was like, okay, you're going to spend as long as you need to, and we're going to pay for this until you are able to film this human trafficker, character.
So you were 2
intimacy.
years, I mean, away from home with the trafficker. I
mean, no, we would go and come back, and then we
Oh,
would like be migrating, on trains and with people, and then we would do like I was following different storylines because there was like a 4-hour series, so I was kind of in charge of several. But we had to visit this person all the time. I mean, 2 years, just visiting on and off, not all the time.
the reason I
obviously
asked
not.
about the State House and the White House is, I mean, because it just said, everything you just described, to try to unpack it is, I mean, my mind's boggled. And then you go, well, if they just stopped that, then that would stop a lot of the yelling and screaming and complaining. Why don't they just stop that? And that's probably not.
Because they're A, clueless and they don't know, and B, do they really care? I don't know. The politicians. I don't know.
Yeah, we're having our own debate here.
Yeah.
We've lost
I mean,
Monica.
I just think
Monica's
like, I'm fascinated by human beings. I'm fascinated by the complexity of human beings, right? Mostly. And things when someone and a politician usually explain something to you, you think like the reality is most likely so much more nuanced and so much more complicated.
Right.
And but we operate in a world where it's like black and white, and these are the bad guys, and but it's not necessarily like that always. I mean, it is sometimes, but not always.
So tell us a little bit about, I mean, you've been targeted by the Egyptian military. The Venezuelan government issued an arrest warrant for you. Tell us a little bit about these situations. Like, how did those kind of things happen? And how did you deal with it?
I mean, a lot of like, being like a part of a political game, I guess in Egypt, it was because I was freelancing for Al Jazeera, and the military had a very big target on the whole network, because they were reporting, Morsi had just been overthrown in a coup. Like, I mean, that was kind of the facts, and they didn't have like proper credentials to operate, I guess. So this kind of proper credentials to operate is interesting, because that's like most of the times that I've gotten in really big trouble with governments is because of these credentials. But I mean, it's a fake argument, because if you're going to report in Iran, you simply can't. And then they'll be like, well, they were reporting without credentials. Well, yeah, how do you get a credential? And why do I even, you know what I mean? Like that's so in Venezuela, for instance, I was there operating legally. The Ministry of Information had all my information. They knew that we came in with cameras through airports, it was all. But then they decided they didn't like our reporting, and they said we weren't authorized to report, so we were going to get arrested.
So what did you do at that point?
I left. I flew first, like 5 o'clock in the morning, I was out.
Did you
Same,
get a
same in
tip?
Egypt. Same,
Did you
same
get
thing.
did you get tipped off by somebody that this was happening then, or?
Oh, the actually, like, the head of the National Assembly, who is still a very, very important man in Venezuela and now wanted for drug trafficking in an American court, went on TV to say that I was a spy and gave my whereabouts on national TV.
Oh my God.
So
So now then you could potentially have anybody who wants to turn you in. The cab driver on the way to the airport.
yes,
right?
yes,
I mean,
absolutely. I mean, thankfully, the Venezuelan regime has a lot of detractors because they're authoritarian. They've been in power forever. They've impoverished one of the richest countries in the world, like biggest oil reserves in the planet. Can you imagine? I mean, just like, seriously, so sad with the average citizen. And I can never, I can't go back as long as they're in power. For instance, there's a red list in airports, and they'll just turn me
they would
back
arrest you
around.
right away. So you can't go to
They'll
Egypt
literally like put me back on a plane, like say you can't enter.
Okay.
So what can a reporter do? Like, and same with all these countries, Syria, whatever. You can get smuggled into the country, but that's very dangerous. And if they catch you and you don't have the stamps or credentials and all this paperwork that these authoritarian or autocratic governments use, if you don't have that, in check, then they'll put you in prison. And if you're American, then you're bargaining chip and you're valuable.
Yeah.
And I am an American citizen, so.
Wow.
What do you do when the gunfire starts? I mean, the bombs are dropping and
You fall to the floor. You take, you try to like.
But how do you? Okay, so and I watched some of them, and you did. I
Wait,
didn't
what
see.
country were you in at
I
the time?
can't remember which situation she was in. There were a lot of them, but the gunfire started, and how do you view yourself as being part of the story? I know for me, I would be doing a stand up, right? The guns are going off, blah blah
Yeah.
blah. Do you not want to be part of the story, or do you?
I mean, I think you do, right? Because I mean, I've been on camera. Exactly. No, I think so. I think I want to be part of it, but I want to, be safe first. I guess. I mean, gunfire too is like spectacular, but it's not necessarily the most dangerous, that can happen. I mean, seriously, like I was in Congo in DRC. We're covering a story about Ebola, 2019, right before the COVID pandemic, and the doctors were coming under attack. It's so sad. Like the doctors who are saving people's lives, are coming under attack.
That happened in the United States too.
Like,
But
no, but I mean, like
not this
literally,
way.
they were being shot at.
Oh, well,
Like
that's
we had
different.
to evacuate with it. Like they were being shot at, and these
Oh,
are combat doctors who are, very used to this kind of situation. But that is like a situation where, like, yeah, they might be shooting, but there's mobs of people that are furious that are saying we're gonna kill every foreigner, and you're just there. It's not like a spectacular like firefight, combat situation, but it's potentially way more dangerous.
Right, because they're actually after you. Where
Exactly.
some other
And
situation you might
because
be crossfire or something.
and because like you can get tortured, raped, so many horrible possibilities, right? Like in a way, combat, I'm not saying combat is safer, but there's a lot of different situations. There's incoming fire, there's just people, outgoing, which is less. There's airstrikes, which I've thankfully never been in a situation where there's airstrikes. My boyfriend has in Syria. I mean, it's just the world is a very messy place, but I think we have training, and we think like you minimize the risk and everything, and we just go and do it, because if everybody gets scared, then what's like, nobody's gonna do it. Like, I don't know what, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think there's an option there.
So what story do you think you did that had the most impact or was the most eye-opening? And what level of danger from 1 to 10?
I mean, I don't know. I really don't know. I think we did something recently about fentanyl in Sinaloa in Mexico for PBS, and not so recently, like 2 years ago. And that had a lot of impact. I think it was dangerous, not like 10. but then again, you also depend on the platform that, right? Like who watches PBS NewsHour? Decision makers, right? So sometimes you might do a story, and just because the audience, right, like the target audience, is in a position to change things, to influence policy, for instance, then you have a great impact. It's really hard to measure that. I didn't know personally that the documentary world and that there's impact campaigns, and now there's increasing amounts of money that's going to impact campaigns, and I really like that. Like that's something I'm excited in being a part of, because you're not only like raising awareness and showing the truth, but you're actually getting money to give to a specific cause. So to Afghan refugees, for instance, if your film's about Afghanistan, or issues that are important. And I think that's really cool. Like we want to think that we are making, we're changing things, but just by being a professional, it's like being a plumber, just by doing what we do, I think we're making a difference.
So what was the
Then
fentanyl
if you
story
get
about?
like, to obviously broadcast it to like a larger audience, then it's greater. But I think, I mean, I just like, I love journalism. I couldn't do anything else.
What was the fentanyl story about? It was just that it was happening, the trade was happening, and that's where it was coming from, Mexico?
Yeah, that's where they were exactly. They were manufacturing it. So we went to see how it was manufactured and who was cooking it and how was, kind of the logistics of how it worked.
You also did a story on like some micro thing. What was it? Where
on micro traffic.
micro trap? Yeah, tell me.
Yeah, for Vice. Yeah, there's a drug show that I really like, and I'm a host for them, and I think it's a really good show. It's about like drug culture and different drugs, but like political. I do more like the political issues, and other kinds of reporters who are not reporters, like hosts. They'll do like, so they have like a reporter person, but they also have hosts who are more like musicians, and then they do like the music scene attached to it. So it's really interesting. I mean, I like just doing different things. It's not like a proper news, journalism, but the parts I do are journalistic. So
You have a couple, if you moved a little to the left or the right, you'd see some Emmys back there, right? I'm assuming you're not doing any of this for awards. Your mom probably is very proud, but also, and mom and dad are probably scared to death more than they are. Did they know that you were going to, I mean, at what point did you have to sit down and talk with them and just say, by the way, I'm going to be going to these areas? Or how did that happen with your parents deciding this is the career that you have chosen, or that chose you, really?
Yeah, no, I think they're proud, and I think they're okay with it for the most part. I mean, I don't tell them a lot of information sometimes, and my mom would always be like, Afghanistan's terrible. I see it on the news, and I'm like, no, mom, it's not really that bad. Like, don't trust everything you see on the news, kind of thing. Like, it's in reality, it's not that bad. Or I just kind of try to soften it like that a little bit. But my mom has worked in development and conflict areas too. So I think I come from a family that where we lived with these kind of risk thresholds that were kind of elevated. But I still think it's probably hard. It's it's a hard life. I mean, it's really unpleasant to be scared and all of this, to be honest. I wonder if I want to do it all my life, but I want to do it less. I think I definitely wasn't, just I was in a different country like every month for a while, and it gets really tiring.
So, I mean, looking at your nuts and bolts, and quick questions. Think we asked, do you have security? Do they bring
If
bodyguards?
you do, if you're with an organization, with a network, you have security with you.
Okay, and then when
but
you
I usually don't.
And
I don't like security, because I like them a lot of the times and they're great, but sometimes they call more attention on you than you would probably want.
do you sleep outside? I mean, do you finish up the day and go to the Four Seasons? How does that work?
No, I mean, usually you sleep in local hotels that are vetted by the security contractors, or sometimes you sleep like in homes, and you rent them, or you pay the family owners if you think they're trustworthy, etc. It really depends. In war zones, it's very hard. But also even like after a hurricane or things like that. You know what I mean? Like I also cover like a lot of sort of hostile because of a natural disaster and all that. So you're trained, you have supplies, you have like solar chargers. I mean, you have like medical kits. We know how to do, we've been trained to do first aid stuff, and we have kits and we know how to use them, like very basic stuff. We have body armor we
Are
try
you
to travel
armed, or
with.
can you even talk about that?
Hmm?
Are you armed, or
Never.
because that would?
And the security, no, that's a great question. The security can't be, because again, that's where like the journalist loses legitimacy. We're not part of any armed actor, right? So you have this insignia that says press, and you're hoping they won't shoot at you. And if they do, then your flak jacket will stop the bullet, I guess. Or I don't know, it's not something like, but the security people are really good at like mob control and these kind of things, right? While you're thinking of your stand-up and what you're going to say and reporting, they're thinking, if this gets bad, I'm going to evacuate her and the team this way. Or, you know what I mean? Normally that's what they should be doing.
Have you ever been injured, or
No.
were a situation where you really thought my life is in danger?
Yes, when I thought I was in danger, but I don't know how, but thankfully it never really got. But seriously, really scary in Congo, for instance, recently, because when you have a whole town turn against you and you're so obviously like a target, you know, I mean, it
And
was,
that sounds like it was unexpected. Like it sounds like you didn't expect it to be
it
that.
was getting really bad, and we really insisted on going there, which was maybe like in hindsight not a great idea. It was really bad. Like the UN
Okay.
would not take us.
Ooh.
They're just like, yes, this is a place where we are it's an active, and then it just degenerated and became worse and worse. And I mean, you have to like work with great local people. I think that's my takeaway, because our fixer evacuated us in a commercial flight. Like we took the last commercial flight out of Beni, and we managed to get out. And so he had this kind of plan B. But everything, it's just really like everything from like you have a car, it needs the windows to be tainted, because if they see you inside a car and that you're white, they'll pull you out of the car and they'll kill you. You know what I mean? It's kind of like thinking ahead, like thinking of everything. And usually I don't. I mean, thankfully, like I work with really good people who like spot these things, and you try to learn, but
Do you have
a
do you have
lot
a
of like
problem?
common knowledge, I think.
Do you have when you're done with the story, so you've been immersed in this, you know, deep dark world or whatever, and then you come back to the DC area. Do you have a problem with re-entry? I mean, things that are, I can go down to Starbucks today.
Yeah,
Is
it's
it an
really
adjustment?
strange. Exactly. It's really strange. I think a lot of people don't cope well. I do, because I have a very solid family connection, like family ties. And I think my family keeps me very sane, and I'm always in communication with them and stuff. Um, I have a very boring life when I'm at home, and I like that. I don't want like a lot of drama, and you know what I mean? Like my life has enough drama
What,
as it
what, ma-
is. So I like boring.
what made me ask that, and I hope it's okay. I was doing research on you. I was looking at your stories, and there was a clip from another podcast, and that took me to your Instagram page.
Mhm.
I looked at your social media. I looked at it for a few minutes, and I jumped off. But there you are as a bridesmaid,
Yeah.
it's and I'm like, and it was like, wait, shouldn't she be under fire someplace? And she does normal things too.
Yes, exactly. But that's the thing, people kind of think of you as a persona, which is not. Like I don't want to be. I'm not interested in fame. The story's not about me. I want to be a messenger of things to the world. And I, like a normal person who has a normal life, and spends a lot of time with the family, and I enjoy what most people enjoy. I mean, in that sense, we're not very different from like, say, military people who deploy, right? Like I'm thinking, I don't know, special forces, or people who do intelligence work. I mean, there's a lot of professions like that. and you just have to find a balance, right? I think there's a lot of PTSD there. Like I, wanted to, I like the only thing I advocate for, because I have no political views or anything public, at least I try to be as neutral as possible. The only thing I advocate for is freelancers in war zones. So, we try to like help with like providing very simple things like gas masks and, because there's a lot of reporters that are very brave and have nothing. And then there's a lot of PTSD. So you try to like help with that and get, get them help and get them, emotional support, and have kind of forums where we can all talk about experiences that we can all relate to, being, deployed to these very strange places and in strange situations. But that's the only thing I advocate for, because the most brave journalism is usually done by freelance people who are underpaid. There's nothing glamorous of that, and they put their lives at risk.
Do you get offers from the networks and you choose to stay freelance?
Some, but nothing. So, I mean, I think there's jobs in networks that I would love to have. For instance, I can't lie, but I haven't gotten that kind of offer. So the ones I get, I know in reality what my daily life is going to be like, and I think that's kind of why I left, CBS and a comfortable salary to start with, because I was just, like 80% of my job wasn't that interesting. Or things that I didn't consider interesting. Like they might have been really interesting for other people, but I didn't like it.
So now you've switched a little bit to documentaries, and you actually produced season 2 of the Showtime series, The Trade. Was nominated for 4 Emmys, including Best Documentary. Can you tell us a little bit about that series and how you got involved with that project?
That series was, a friend of mine was producing it. He's a big director now, and that's the series I was telling you guys about, where we were just on the road with migrants. We were just trying to see, like, it was a very ambitious and well-funded project, thankfully. So we had crews that were covering the American side and CBP, and were embedded with law enforcement, but I was kind of doing like the darker side, like the underground portion.
So the woman who was trafficking, that was part of
Yeah, that was for that. Exactly.
Oh,
So we wanted to get into like the underbelly of like human smuggling, and just be with migrants and like see what they go through. I mean, as much as possible. Like, honestly, I would never say that we suffered as much as them. In the end, we are privileged journalists. Like, don't want people to get this wrong. Like, in the end, we do have time to take breaks and go and take a shower and go to a hotel. You know what I mean? This is stuff that people that are in horrible situations, they can't do, in terms of like victims, for instance. But I think it's I think everybody, especially because I'm Hispanic, I think I wanted to do it on a personal level too. I wanted to see what these people who are doing jobs that Americans don't want to do, what they go through. And I can tell you that now I look at them with much admiration and very differently.
Is there any place in America that you want to? I mean, you could tell some pretty dangerous stories on
Yeah,
the main streets of many a city here.
I have a couple. Yeah. I have a couple of stories that I would love to do here. I love reporting in the US, and you're right. I mean, I've been to Baltimore in areas and under
That was one of
circumstances
the cities I was
that's
thinking
really
about.
dangerous.
We both worked in Baltimore as journalists, so
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
We were I was a street reporter when it was the second dangerous city in the country.
It's dangerous, right?
Yeah, where
It
you'd go
is.
to the corner and people would just be
Yeah.
like, they'd show you your gun and just be like, get the F out of here. And you're like, okay, cool, bye.
yeah. What
Exactly.
crazy?
Everybody's
What are you
armed, right? In
shooting here
America,
for?
everybody's armed. I mean, people don't realize that. In other countries, it's hard to get a gun. Here, it's not hard to get a gun. So immediately the stakes, it's dangerous.
Our son just got his car stolen in Baltimore.
Yeah, he was carjacked. Yeah.
I'm sorry to
And
hear
Federal
that.
Hill. Which it's
I mean, there
where all
was
the
like,
kids-
they tried to do a coup d'etat in America, right? Like
Right.
January 6th. I mean, like the story is increasingly here. And I would like love to cover that too. I mean, anywhere. I mean, I
What
think
angle would
there's
you
no
take?
bad stories, really.
Yeah. What angle would you take on? If you
What
did?
story is not being told that you're like, man, if I could tell a story in the US that I think is being ignored? What
Yeah.
story would that be?
Precisely, the rise of white supremacy. I'd like to
Oh,
cover it fairly and understand it. And I don't think I have enough information. And I think, embedding with these groups that people don't get to, that's the value added. That if you get to live with them, you're probably closer to their motivation and can understand it a little bit better. I'm not saying it makes it good or bad or whatever, but at least I think you can portray it in a more, like in a truer light, because I don't know if people have really gotten to the bottom of it.
yeah. Yeah.
I think
But
it's an
wait,
interesting.
so you would tell
But
both.
Antifa too, for instance, sorry to interrupt, like, I'd be interested to know what that is about. And, all this domestic terrorism, I mean, it's on the rise, clearly. And it'd be really good to do something in depth and get to the root of the cause and to the root of the matter, if it's possible at all. Sometimes you never get to do that. I mean, these are just kind of wishful thinking scenarios.
And to think of who's funding it, you might be
Yes.
surprised at money's coming from somewhere, and it's probably in very fascinating places that we would have no clue, or that somebody
Exactly.
that,
Like, follow the money, right?
yeah,
I mean, I would love that. I'm not so, like, I'm not as good as, like other investigative reporters. I think I'm more like, I like to do kind of shoe leather and all of that, but I'm not good at, like, freedom of information requests and follow, this data. There's almost like data analysis you can do nowadays. But I think I could put a team together. I know where with these people who are good at these things are. I think that, investigative journalism is the best, the highest kind of manifestation.
what do you think about, I mean, do you feel like it used to be back in the day, where most even local TV stations had an investigative unit,
Yeah.
and even if they didn't get to do the stuff that you're doing that in depth, at least something was being done. And I think we still have one in DC. One of the stations does, but it used to be every single station almost had one, and it's kind of just gone away as far as a local news thing, local TV news anyway. I mean, do you think that part of the problems with, all the corruption it seems that we're having is there's a massive increase? Is it part of that journalism just is changing, and we don't have the people covering it? And if you don't have the people covering it, then a lot more stuff people get away with a lot more.
It's very hard. I think, and I do a lot of, like, speaking in universities and stuff, and a lot of people go like, I want to have your job. And I'm really, it's weird, because I think somehow, I don't know if my job's going to be around, you know what I mean, in the next decade or so. And it's really tragic. And I want to kind of hold on and kind of, tell people how important what we do is. But you're right. I don't know what's going to happen. The industry has changed so much, even from when I started to now, so much. I think there's still, like, people who want to fund good projects, but that's why maybe I've shifted a little bit more to, like, longer format. But I don't know if that's going to continue too, right? It's all very, like, uncertain. And you're right. I mean, local newspapers were so good, right? Like, city newspapers had an international desk, like a real international desk before, an investigative unit. And it's a loss for society when they realize that, you can't get everything, all the information from Twitter and from people with phones. Then it'll be too late.
Yeah.
I mean, and I don't want to be a pessimist, but I worry about this every day. Not for me, but for for the future.
Do you worry about I mean, you have to overcome so much other things as you pursue stories, but the fake news and the anger that's been generated on that side, and here you are risking your life day after day, trying to tell the truth, trying to get to the facts. Does that impact you at all?
Absolutely, especially in the US. Working here is very hard, because you're right. Like, and people have a very low perception and a low opinion of journalists, and maybe rightly so. There's a lot of bad journalism here. But I try to, like, I try to tell people, don't judge the whole profession. Judge us individually. There's good people and bad people everywhere. Good at their job, bad at their job. That's life. But here we're going through, like, a huge crisis. But everything's, like, again, very, very binary here. It's like you're either a liberal and a Democrat or Republican. And, I think these are traps for journalists. I think we should,
You
just
blew
be
my
less
mind
political.
when you said you wanted to do white supremacy and basically tell both sides of the story. And I was like, can you even tell? And who, everybody who goes out to tell the story mocks the white supremacists, but you would come at it from a different angle.
I mean, it's kind of like, I don't know, we had like really good sort of teachers of and these networks, or, when you learn about the style of this network versus the other, and they'd be like, normally, like, it's a -1 and a +1 to do a 0, right? Like to balance out. Life is not really like that. If there's a very unreported story, you're not going to give them equal time. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know if things can be seen again through that like binary perspective. White supremacist is bad. Of course, of course it is, but you would hopefully go beyond that,
Right. Well,
beyond the
you want to
judgment,
know
and try
the
to see
why.
how it became about what they
Yeah.
believe it, if anything. I don't know. I think, everything is just more interesting than it seems on the surface.
Yeah. The why. You'd want to know why people feel this way, and why they're doing what they're doing, and is it cult like? Is it,
Exactly.
what is it? And is it, all those things that maybe most people wouldn't ask or wouldn't care, or they've already made up their just, their opinion. Like a lot of people make their opinions on poverty. Well, people who are poor, it's
Mhm.
because they're lazy or they're this or that. They've already made up their opinion. No, there's so much complication there. There's so many
Exactly.
stories. Maybe they were a veteran and they, got shot in a war and came back. And, it's just like, you can't judge people by whatever it is. There's a story behind it. And it sounds like.
Exactly. And I don't think journalists should judge. And that's a little
Yeah.
bit of what has changed, when every journalist has an opinion. And that's what I emphasize. Like, I don't tweet anything political. Nobody would know my politics. And I'm happy. And I make a conscious fact of that, because it's not our job to imprint this on our stories. I think you kind of go with an open mind and a curious mind. Is this a movement? Like you said, are they being funded? Oh, wait, they have a lot of money. Where does it come from? You start getting like, I don't know. I don't know any information for now, but if you get, I like the kind of embedding journalism where you can kind of see where this is going to. And then you get hunches like, this is maybe where I should take the story.
Mhm.
But you don't have a script, and I think
Right,
that's,
and you don't know what the outcome. A good journalist never knows what
yeah,
the story is gonna be because the story is evolving in front of them, and it's changing, but I think a lot of people think that journalists just have decided, like, "Oh, they're just trying to take down this person, this politician or that politician." I'm like, most journalists, no, some, yes, but 90% of real, true journalists, they're just trying to get to the truth, and that doesn't mean 50% that side, 50% that side, if that side is lying. It just means what's the truth and what's the facts.
exactly. And I think just the system has made it that maybe being on TV is glamorous and it pays money, and you know what I mean? So I think there's all these traps. But you're right. I think most journalists who believe in this and who've made a conscious choice, like, I want to do this, and this is the only thing I want to do, are really good, solid people. But I think, the industry has evolved in ways that, yes, maybe people think it's glamorous, and being on TV becomes this and that, and then the salaries, at some point, like, journalists didn't make, fortunes or anything. It's, if you are making fortunes, how can you be like a normal person and live with them and understand what they're saying? That's an interesting thing, for instance.
Mm.
Yeah.
I want to keep on being like a normal person always.
Do you
Because the
find
moment you're detached from that, you can't relate. You can't relate to anything.
do the international networks do a better job? They used to.
They used to, I like the BBC, for instance. I've always thought they had like overall sort of solid reporting and not biased. And they have like decades of like a culture where they have really good journalists, and they have really good interviewers who are not, easy on the politicians they're interviewing, which is something really important that you can always learn from the Brits. um I think there's good there's good journalists that I like and follow, colleagues of mine in different networks in America, but I still think, I mean, the newspaper, like the New York Times and the Washington Post, have the best investigations, they have the best journalism, I think, to this day. But everything has gone down the hill, which is really sad.
So when's your book coming out, or your movie? When do we get to see the real story?
I mean, I don't know. I'm really bad. I'm a really bad writer. So you want to help me write it?
Says the journalist.
I do TV and I can get, pictures and stuff, but like writing a book is hard.
Mm-hmm.
It's really hard.
But you have amazing stories to tell.
I think I have good stories, but I don't think I'm the most interesting person, seriously, I don't. I think there's other journalists out there that are way more interesting. I might want to write about them.
That's the story. That's the sign of a very good journalist right there. Always want to tell other people's stories. How do people follow you or follow your work? Or do you not want to be followed because of where you may be?
No, I do.
Meet her in an
I'm
alley late at night with blindfolds.
Yes, exactly. That's a problem. I don't post that much, and if I post, maybe I'm out of the place normally, and I'm really bored by social media somehow. Sorry, I'm really bored by it. Yeah, I mean, I have a website, monicavillamizar.com, and I'm on Twitter, but not so actively on Twitter. I just basically retweet my dad lately. That's as much as I do. I just think, yeah, the social media culture has really harmed journalism as well. And I don't want to be like super negative again, but yeah, I'm trying to stay off of that as much as I can.
Well,
makes total
Monica
sense.
Villamizar, thank you so much. We find you very interesting. We find you fascinating.
Thank you.
Yeah,
thank you so much. It was so fun to speak to you guys.
Admiration. I mean, the streets of Baltimore were dangerous enough for me. You would not be finding me in Egypt or Colombia or with any drug lords. So hats off, because I know some people have to do it, and I'm too scared.
Keep up the important and necessary work, and please stay safe.
Yes.
Thank you so much, guys, and thank you for having this podcast and highlighting, journalism and why it matters. That's amazing, and that's why I wanted to come, because I think, it is important.
Well, thank you. That's nice. And we always explain that Kathy thinks that we should be the PR company for journalism. Just the big
Yes,
J, whatever.
The big J.
That would be great.
Inspiring us.
I think we need that. Why don't you guys, seriously? It's amazing.
We've been self-appointed.
When your very talented producer told me this is what we do, the media has been, discredited over the past 10 years. We want to highlight, and I was like, I like it. Immediately, you've got me from the start. This is what I believe. I believe in what we do.
Awesome. Well, nobody hired us either. We just self-appointed ourselves as your PR agents. So let us know if you need a publicist. Obviously, we're pro bono.
Okay, great. Thank you so much. No, thanks for what you guys do.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it.